Nice to be here. Thank you all so much for being here today. I really appreciate it. On time, but rather than mention anybody by name, Judge Dupree used to say that I'll leave somebody out. So it's, you know who you are. And thank you for coming. Appreciate it. This Friday, the 29th of August, 46 years ago, at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, after 6.5 hours, including lunch, the jury was deliberating in the McDonald case. We all thought there would be a long time out, maybe days. I still remember sitting on the floor in the lobby when Ann Goodwin, who is the deputy clerk, opens the door and says, "The jury has a verdict." Phil, if you're a lawyer, there are no more scary words than to hear the jury has a verdict, no matter which side you're on. So we went back inside. The room was packed. Judge Dupree locked the doors. Did not let anybody come in or go out. The jury came in. Here's what happened. The first juror to come in was a man stumbling to get a seat. And he was weeping. The second juror was the same. And then the rest of them just came in. The foreman was a former highway patrolman from down near Fayetteville, which was a good thing for us, we thought. These law enforcement. He gave the verdict form to Judge Dupree. He opened it, he looked at it, and my memory is faulty, but I recall that he looked in my direction, but did not whisper, say a word, or do any nuance. Nothing. You couldn't read anything from him. The verdict on the first count of murder in the first degree against Colette McDonald was not guilty. And you know, a trial's like a wedding. You got the bride's side and the groom's side on the different sides of court. Our side was on the right, theirs was on the left. On the second count of murder in the second degree, it was guilty. When he said those words, there was a blood-curdling scream in the courtroom that you have never seen on any television series, on any law case, ever. It was McDonald's mother, which I guess is understandable. She had to leave the courtroom. They had to get permission for her to leave the courtroom. She was so distraught and upset. This Friday was 46 years ago, was the first time that McDonald ever went to prison. He went to Butner for several days before he was shipped off to Atlanta, to Texas, and to California, and to Maryland. He has returned to Butner within the last several days, probably due to health reasons. They have health facilities there, but it's the major federal prison for health issues in the United States. He has kidney issues. He will be 82 years old in October. He was 35 or 6. I never can get my math straight when he was convicted. He has spent all that time in prison except for 1 year when he was released in the early 1980s because of speedy trial issues with the courts. And the U.S. Supreme Court put him back in prison. He's been there ever since. He has filed lots of motions, lots of allegations, lots of complaints, but ultimately he has never won those. And so he is still where he is. And the jury trial that came back in 1979 has never been overturned, which is in itself remarkable. Let me tell you what happened. It was a cold and rainy morning, dark, on February the 17th, 1970, when a call was received at Fort Bragg that something had happened, a medical emergency, at 544 Castle Drive. They drove 3 or 4 Jeeps of MPs. These were young men, 22, 23 years old, who didn't do anything more than direct traffic or domestic disturbances. They didn't do murder cases. So they go there. They go to the front door, it's locked. It's an in unit. It's a brick 1-story. There's a second story, but McDonald apartment's on the first floor. They went around to the back. The back door's open. Richard DeVere from New York walks in with his little flashlight, scared to death. And he sees on the floor, the master bedroom, a woman in pink pajamas, hands outstretched, looking toward the ceiling, eyes unseeing, and a man laying next to her in the crook of her arm, with pajama bottoms, blue pajama bottoms, no shirt, no tie. And DeVere runs out of the apartment and gets help, and they all come back in. The guy behind him has a pistol, ready to shoot somebody. And DeVere turns around and says, "Put the pistol down, because you're going to get excited and you're going to shoot me." And so they go in and goes to the first door on the right, and it's a bedroom, small bedroom. There's a little girl there, laying in bed, obviously dead. They go to the one on the left, there's another little girl in the bedroom, obviously dead. They go to the rest of the apartment, there's nobody there. They clean the apartment, there's nobody there. They get the father who lives upstairs to come down and identify the bodies. They call Womack Army Hospital for ambulances, and medical people, the Army CID, the investigative division, comes within an hour. It all starts. McDonald has woken up. And so one of the MPs asks him, "Who did this to you? Who did this to you?" And he describes 4 people. 4 people. 3 men and a woman. And that's where it all began. And that's where the chase began. For about 4 or 5 years, the United States government did not want to prosecute this case. They thought they could not win because it was totally a circumstantial evidence case. And they say that in a way that you think circumstantial evidence is bad. It's not bad. It's just as good as direct evidence. They said there's no motive. There's only a 30% chance of winning. The United States Attorney's Office in Raleigh, North Carolina, writes a letter to the U.S. government saying there's only a 30% chance of winning, and we're going to decline prosecution. The government in Washington does the same. Nothing. One man named Freddie Kassab, Canadian-born, the second husband of Mildred, who was Colette's mother, is outraged. All of you all the men in this room would like to be like Freddie Kassab. He knew passion. And when he came after you, you had best run. He goes to Clinton, North Carolina, and sees Judge Butler, swears out a complaint of murder against his son-in-law, or former son-in-law. A grand jury is convened in 1974. The indictment was returned in 75. It's ready for trial in the summer. It's put off because of court filings and motions. And it's actually dismissed on speedy trial grounds on the basis that those years where nothing was going on in the 70s was a violation of McDonald's rights, even though he hadn't been indicted. So the government appeals all this. It goes finally to the United States Supreme Court. The United States Supreme Court, in the late winter of 1978, or the early morning, January, February of 79, returns it to North Carolina for trial. And that's where I come in. I'm the only one there. I mean, really, the only one there. I was 34 years old. My co-counsel was 32. When I went to the U.S. Attorney's Office, I had tried one case in my life. I'd never seen a murder case, much less tried one. The Justice Department let us do it because we were going to lose. So what the heck? Why put somebody else on? And that's the truth. So we started. Every trial is a story. And whoever tells the best story wins. So our job was to tell a good story. How do you make something out of fibers and blood and hair and fingerprints and stuff and no clear motive? And McDonald was a well-known physician. How do you do that? Well, this is back when the FBI had a glistening reputation for its lab. And they got a hold of all those threads and fibers. And so let me tell you, by way of telling you the story of how I think it went down, and relate to you that evidence. There's a movie called Fatal Vision. It was a TV movie. There's only 4 minutes in the whole thing that's worthwhile. But there's 4 minutes. Carl Malden is playing Freddie Casal. And I don't remember who played the FBI agent in charge, but Freddie asked the FBI to tell him how it happened. So he has a diagram of the house, every room in the house. And everybody in the family had a blood type that was different. Colette was type A. Jeff was type B. Kimberly was type AB. And Kristen was O. There was no DNA at that time. There was very little forensic examination at that time, in the 1970s. This was one of the first. Here's what I think happened. And this is what the jury concluded. About 10:30 or 11 o'clock that night, Colette has been out to a class at a community college, Fayetteville Tech. Stops at a 7-Eleven to get some stuff. Comes home, opens the door, takes off of her Weegens. Remember Weegens?
No doubt.
Puts them by the table. Takes her pocketbook out. She was 26 years old. 26 years old. She will never leave the apartment alive again. Sometime, and this is where it gets sketchy, and I can't tell you what happened exactly because I don't know. Only one person does, and he's not going to tell us. She was wearing pink pajamas. She has them on. They got into an argument. I know you all have never gotten into arguments. And I know if you've been married a long time, you've never argued with your spouse. You may never hit your spouse, but you probably wanted to. Colette did hit him. And she had a knife, a dull knife. And it's like what you're wearing right here is his pajama top. She takes this knife and does like this. And can y'all hear me in the back? And cuts a hole in the sleeve, which enrages McDonald. It would enrage most people, I suppose. He has a club made out of ash wood, which is heavy wood. He picks it up. It's part of a bed slant belonging to Kimberly's bed, and swings it like a weapon. But first he pushes her away. There's bruising on her chest that matches the end of the club. He takes the club and he hits her with a club. He comes out and hits her on the head. He swings it. He hits her so many times and so hard that a 13.5-inch splinter falls off on the floor. Her blood is found on the ceiling. The short, it's not like these ceilings, they're short ceilings. This is early marriage. Type blood is on the ceiling. Type blood is all over this cloth. McDonald's not hurt. She doesn't strike him again. He hits her so hard that he breaks her skull and breaks both of her arms. But he does not kill her. She would have lived. Barely, but she would have lived if he stopped. You can always stop. You know, if he'd simply stopped. Once when he was swinging the club, his older daughter, Kimberly, has gotten out of her bed to find out what's going on, and she walks to the edge of the door saying, "Daddy, Daddy, Daddy, Daddy." We know that because that's what McDonald says she said. And he hits her with the club. She is hit so severely that it would kill her. She no longer can speak. Her blood is found in droplets on the bare wooden floor that go into the master bedroom. And then he picks her up and he carries her to her bed. And he lays her in the bed, and the left side of her cheek, which is injured, is on the pillow side, obviously indicating she was placed there. He still has his pajama top on at this point. He doesn't realize it's torn. He doesn't realize that. And you know what happens? You know when you machine wash something, how it gets thin, almost transparent? That's what was happening. And it was dropping threads. Between 20 and 30 threads that matched his pajama top are found in the bed underneath the covers. Because he covers her up, and lo and behold, he tucks her in. He leaves that room and goes to find his wife, Colette. He doesn't know where she is. She's left the bedroom. She's in this other bedroom across the hall trying to protect her youngest daughter, who is 2.5 years old. How many of y'all have grandchildren? Do any of y'all have granddaughters under 5 or 6 years old? Can you imagine that? Well, he hits Colette again with a club. Still hadn't killed her, but close. She's unconscious. He wants to get her out of that room, so he goes to the bedroom and gets a bed sheet off the top of the bed. Brings it in, lays it on the floor, puts her on it, carries her out. But in so doing, he really incriminates himself. He steps on the sheet where her blood is, and he's barefooted. And he walks out of the room and leaves his footprint, leaving the bedroom. Not going in, but leaving. But the problem is, it's his footprint, it's her blood type. How did that happen? We know that Colette was on the sheet. because through fabric impressions, we can trace what she was wearing to the blood that's on the sheet. And then he goes back to find Kristen. He stabs Kristen 40-some times with an ice pick and a knife. The only merciful thing is that her vital organs were stabbed probably quickly. So that could have been painless, some of the stab wounds. The pathologist who examined her told me when I was talking to him in Greensboro that she had a scratch or like a paper cut on one of her fingers. Wasn't a severe cut. I said, what's that cut for? He said, oh, that's a defensive weapon, defensive wound. Think about that, a defensive wound. For it to be a defensive wound, it means you have to fight back. And if you fight back, you have to know what's going on. So the last person she saw alive was her daddy. Not her father, not her, but her daddy. Killing her. I said just those words to the jury, right behind McDonald, as I was standing right behind him in the courtroom that day. He goes into the bedroom, takes his pajama top off, places it on top of his wife to soak up the blood, to make the physical evidence get neater, and stabs her with an ice pick 24 times. Now, if you're going to do it like that, inadvertently, you sort of make a pattern how you do it. 3 here, 4 there, stuff like that, And then he calls the MPs, or calls the military for help. Here's his story. This is the defense story. He was a wonderful person. Marvelous dad. The happiest times of their lives. He would never do that. You have no motive. Why would I do that? I was attacked. I was sleeping on the sofa in the living room because my older child had went to her side of the bed and I was going to sleep there at night. 4 people came in. They hit me with a club. They stabbed me repeatedly. I had life-threatening injuries. I was almost crashed out. There was a woman at the end of the sofa singing "As It Is Groovy, Kill the Pig." She had a flickering like a candle. And that's all I remember. I didn't do anything to anybody. It's a story. I mean, I shortened it, but that's essentially what the story is. If you asked him today if he could talk, that's what he would tell you. The problem is, he says the pajama top was torn in the living room. But there are no threads in the living room. But there are about 100 threads in the master bedroom, indicating it was torn in another room. There's no blood in the living room, on the floor, or the sofa. I don't know what y'all's rooms look like, but think about this for a second. If last night someone had broken into where you live and you thought your life was at risk, if you could, you would fight back. And you'd fight back with everything you could. That means you get a lamp and try to hit them. You knock things off the table. It'd be like a hurricane that come through your place. Their place looked pristine. The pictures on the wall weren't moved. The lamps were in proper shape. The coffee table was overturned on its side, but that was about it. Nothing else was undone. The pajama top had 56 holes in it, like cigarette burns, non-tearing holes. How many of y'all go to bed at night with a pajama top which has 50-some holes in it? Not many. So how did those holes get there? We believed they got there when he stabbed her through the pajama top, the ice pick into her chest. But how did we prove it? How would you prove that? Has anybody got an idea how you might prove that? I wasn't smart enough. None of this is my work. I was the mouthpiece for everybody. That's what I was. I'm not the smart guy who thought up all this. I told the story, but I didn't do physical evidence. I didn't analyze it. There's a young lady named Shirley Green. You remember the movie? I don't remember the name of it. Was it Irma Brockback? What was her name? Whatever that. The paralegal out. You know, they made a Academy Award winning movie about her. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Shirley Green is just like her. She worked late. She was a chemist. She stayed late. She worked. And she found out that if she looked at the pictures of Colette's body and the stab wounds, and she got some graphite paper and put over those holes, she tried to prove that she could take little prongs and put them through the pajama top and create a pattern and see if she could reduplicate what it done. And she was able to do that when she moved the pajama top. That's what happened. That's what the jury convicted her on. The defense thought this was all made up by us. So Brian Murtaugh, who's my co-counsel and I, we had a spare pajama top that he had bought before the trial. Been sitting in my office on a chair for months. We didn't know what to do with it. So Brian and I decided, let's do a demonstration in the courtroom. We believe that if you stab somebody, if you put your arms up like that, and I come at you with an ice pick, I'm going to hurt you. I mean, before you all can come get me, I'm going to hurt you because I've got the weapon and you don't. So I'm going to get Brian to hold the pajama top. And I'm going to go in front of the jury and get the ice pick, the one that was the murder weapon. It's in evidence, and I'm going to come at you, at Brian, and I'm going to stab. And if the pajama top shreds, we win. Because it couldn't be non-tearing. They believed it would be non-tearing. So we do this, and we hadn't practiced. This was like AJ and the glove didn't fit. and we had practices. We did not, you know how guys are, we didn't have sense enough to go buy a second pajama top. Because it wasn't blue. And so I said, don't worry about it, Brian. I am not going to screw this up. And so I go at Brian and stare. And I accidentally, in front of the jury, stab Brian. And they have to stop the trial to get him a bandage. The defense is laughing at us. They don't understand what we just showed. And I have to tell you, I won't use exactly what I said. But as I walked back to the table, on the front row, there was a court reporter from the News Observer named Jenny Carroll, who was a marvelous writer. She was my friend. And I looked right at her and I said, Jenny, I am a son of a you-know-what. He is guilty as hell. And that was the emotional moment for me that I thought we had locked. Still, it was tough. Let me check my time, make sure I'm not going too fast. Let me go about 5 more minutes on McDonald. And we went back and we tried to see what we could do to bring this all home. And so we were each given 3 hours and 15 minutes to make our closing arguments to the jury. That's a long time to talk.
You think about sitting here for an hour. Okay. So we went in the morning. We reserved 40 minutes for rebuttal. Bernie started at 1 o'clock. Bernie Siegel from California. He did not tell a good story. Wade Smith would have told a wonderful story. I'm glad he did. And you all have been sitting here for just 30 minutes. As interesting as I am, after about 2 hours of me, you're going to start squirming in your seats. And as you get to 3, and we have taken a bathroom break. Think about sitting there crossing your legs back and forth for 3 hours. And that's what's happening. Siegel loses track of the time. Wade is supposed to speak for an hour. And Judge Dupree taps his pencil on the lectern and says, Mr. Siegel, you have 1 minute left. No, 5 minutes left. And Bernie won't shut up. He talks for another 3 or 4 minutes telling what Wade's going to say. When they take the recess to let everybody take the bathroom break, the defense has 60 seconds to make a 1 hour closing argument. Well, I'm worried that Judge Dupree might split the baby, you know, and give them more time and give me more time, but I don't want any more time. So Wade comes back in. I said, Wade, I'll tell you what I'll do. If you will tell the jury that I did this, I will give you 10 minutes of my time. And he accepts it. That ends any question about whether Dupree would give him more time. He says, the judge, if you would just tap your pencil when 10 minutes are up, I will sit down. I have told Wade Smith for 20 years that I was the one who tapped the pencil. And it was after about 7 or 8 minutes. I didn't hear anymore. I didn't do that, but it makes him squirm. Anyway, he didn't get a chance to do that. Freddie passed away in 1995. Mildred, about a year before him. He spent his entire life since 1970s on this case. Totally. That's all he lived for. That's all his son lived for, who passed away about a year or so ago. It's very sad that that's what happened, but it did. Mildred and Freddie went to California to see the screening of the television movie Fatal Vision. And one of the people there said, this must be a wonderful night for you. And Mildred just exploded. There's nothing wonderful about this, doing this and seeing this, you know. Freddie and Mildred, to their last dying days, lived this case. And but for them, particularly Freddie, it would never have seen the light of day. Why did he do it? What's the motive? You know, when I was waiting tables on 42nd Street, I wasn't very good. But I always got 2 questions from almost every table. The first question was, what's your fresh fish tonight? And the second question was, do you really think he did it? And why? They didn't even say who he was. You know, they just said, do you think he did it? And they wanted to know why. And this is not good for women, but he said, the most common refrain was, well, I can understand him killing his wife, but I don't understand killing the children. Well, whoever killed one killed the others. You know, that's the whole thing. You know, you can't pick and choose. Anyway, he got convicted. He got these 3 life sentences. He's never got parole. He has only requested parole 1 time at a hearing that was denied. He remarried some years ago to this lady who they've never spent the night together. Wade and I had a discussion about this in January. He says, Jim, he needs to go home. Well, Wade? No. He says, but he's never spent a night with his wife. Well, there's a reason for that, Wade. He killed his first wife. You know, you don't get a pass. And that happened. It could have gone the other way, I suppose. Circumstances have been different. But we were fortunate to catch lightning in the bottle, so to speak. And it came back guilty. The afternoon before the verdict came back, I'm sitting in the courtroom by myself on one of those tables, and Jenny Carroll's in there with me. And she says, "What do you think's going to happen?" And I said, and I won't repeat again what I said, but I said, "I think a blankety blank miracle for us to win this case." Not that I didn't think we deserved it, but I didn't think a jury would do it. The thing that convinced me so much about the jury system is this. These are 12 people who, when the trial started, truly was presumed innocent, factually as well as any other way. And slowly over time, they swung the other way and convicted. That's the McDonald case in a nutshell for 30 minutes. It could go a long time after that, but that's it. Let me switch gears to another case, another situation, which is more personal. While I was shaking hands here a while ago, I think it was you, I'm not sure, but somebody said to me, "I'm just glad you're not in jail." So am I. When they sent out the flyer, John Regna sends me a copy, and I read it real quickly to see what it says, and I said, "Oh my gosh, they had me serving 3.5 years." I did not serve 3.5 years. It felt like 3.5 years. It was 3.5 months. There's a big difference between 3.5 and 3.5 months. And somebody said, "Well, that's not too." Somebody said here, "That's not too bad." Let me tell you something. 15 minutes, an hour is a long time. I don't care how nice your apartment is here. If you had to stay in that apartment all day, every day, except to go eat or have meals delivered to you, after a while, you would get tired of it. You might get tired of it anyway, but you really get tired of it that way. So let me take you back to 1993. It's a Wednesday. It's January 13th. I go into the office, make the coffee. The phone rings. It's a lady from BB&T in Cary. I said, "Miss Flower." "Yes. You remember back at Thanksgiving, a couple months before, when you called me and asked me to wire some money, $50,000, to a client, and I did so." "Yes." "Well, I don't think you should have done that, and I shouldn't have done it. So I know you're going to be in trouble, but I might be in trouble too." I said, "Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. I'll check it out." So I was going to call one of my partners in Greensboro to talk about it, and I called, and he was out of town in a meeting. I don't know what made me go to the window and look in the parking lot, but there was this car in the parking lot. He was coming from Greensboro. He was there for a meeting. He was there to see me. So about mid-morning, I'm in the office of a couple of friends of mine, both of whom are partners of the law firm. It's a large law firm. The offices in Raleigh, Greensboro, and Charlotte. And they say, "Jim, did you do this? We've got these alleged orders that make no sense. Did you write these?" "Yeah." "If we call this person whose money you sent and asked him, 'Did you have permission to send this money?' would he say you did have permission?" And incredibly, I said, "Yes, he would." That was a lie. And Dick says to me, "Jim, I don't believe you." I said, "Well, listen, Dick, here's the deal. If you will let me close my eyes, when I open them, after 30 seconds, I will tell you the truth. And let me tell you what you hope will happen in those 30 seconds. You want to die. I want to be vaporized." But I opened them, told the truth, and it changed everything. Any anger that they had tended to go away. It turned to disappointment from anger over time. It ended my legal career pretty quickly. And on Friday, after having a meeting with Wade Smith, who became my lawyer at no charge, which was nice, he wanted me to go see a doctor, psychiatrist in Durham. I'd never been to see a psychiatrist in my life, named Gene Sparrow. I didn't believe in psychiatry. I didn't yet. I was really not a liberal thinker on this. And so this made everybody mad when I canceled my first appointment after she rescheduled her other patients to see me. So the firm said, Jim, you're going to go this afternoon at 3 o'clock. This is on Friday. You're going to go, and we're going to have your secretary follow you on the way. Her office is in Durham. So my first trip to a psychiatrist's office was to drive from here to Durham on I-40 with my secretary following behind to make sure I showed up. The next week, they're getting worried about me. They're worried that I'm going to do something to my... They're worried I'm going to kill myself because of what's getting ready to hit the fan. And I haven't done anything to persuade them particularly. And so Wade says, we want to put you... They can't put me in prison or jail. They wanted to, but they couldn't. Because they hadn't convicted. And so they said, look, we're going to want to put you in a mental hospital. How many of y'all would like to go to a mental hospital this afternoon? Well, we've got beds ready now for you in 2 places. They were ready. Well, where are they? Well, the first one is Durham County General in Durham. What's the other one? The other one's Duke University. I looked away and said, is this going to be in the newspaper? Jimmy, it's going to be in the paper. You're just well enough known it's going to be in the newspaper. Well, okay, under that circumstance, I'll go to Duke. He said, okay, why? Well, Duke is so much more prestigious sounding than I said, I want to go. And that's why I went to Duke Hospital as opposed to the other one. I was concerned about how it looked. Yeah, it's stupid. So that's where I went. Stayed a week, should have stayed a month, but insurance doesn't pay real well for those types of things. So I left after a week, had all these tests done, had MRIs done. You know, my cholesterol was through the roof at 300 plus. It showed a small infarct stroke that didn't do anything, it just was there, you know. But I was a mess. And it got worse. I knew why they wanted me to locked up. Back when the News and Observer was still a newspaper. This is before John was there. The Daniels family ran it, I think. Daniels family. That's okay. I have to tell you a funny story about Frank Daniels. The headline across the fold on Super Bowl Sunday, which means nobody has anything to do except read the paper and wait for the game to start, was star lawyer's career is shattered in bizarre deceptions. That was me. Okay. My Frank Daniels story. Frank takes me to breakfast one time at Big Ed's. He sits there. I had written a book called Flame Out, which did moderately well. And Frank said, Jim, you know, if I had helped you out, you'd call me, I've been your publisher, you could have made $1 million on this book. What do you mean? How would I? Well, you needed to change, you had the wrong title. What would you have called it? How to come back when you're really effed up. He's probably right. If I could do it over again, I'd probably do something similar to that, you know? Anyway, the spring is pretty tough. Summer comes in, I'm under investigation by the SBI. And in July, on a Friday night, I get a call from Wade Smith and Rick Cameron. I don't know if any of y'all know Rick. He's another lawyer in town. Who's my lawyer. And they tell me that Colin Willoughby, the DA, was going to probably get an indictment against me the following week for wrongdoing. The money that I transferred around, the orders that I wrote, the money that I sent to a client, all these things. And Jim, you're going to need to sell your house. It's too nice. You need to sell your car. It's too nice. You need to quit going to church. You shouldn't be singing a coat and tie at church. All these things I should do. It's the first time in my life I can never fix everything. Most of y'all in your life have grown up and lived your life knowing that more than likely, whatever it is, you can come close to fixing it. Wade Smith's great line is, if nobody's died, everything can be fixed. I don't know if that's true or not, but he uses it. I went upstairs to get the keys to my car. I decided I would kill myself that night. It's black. My mood was as black as these armchairs, or as black as this sweater. That's what anybody who's thinking about suicide, let me just tell you all, anybody who's thinking about doing that, that's how black it is. You feel alone, you feel lost, you feel there's no way out except this. And it makes perfect sense to you. You're going to be a drag on everybody else, so why not leave? But I didn't know how to do it. I didn't have enough pills. I didn't own a gun. I don't like knives. I'm afraid of heights. And I didn't want to get in front of a car because that car might just hurt me. I would go to Hilton Head, South Carolina, to Sea Pines, where I did before, and walk on the beach, and then walk into the water. Had a lot of drama to it, you know. I was really angry. I was really angry at myself. Not anybody, but really angry at myself. And so my daughter Stacy, who at that time was 14 years old, and you remember you're at the age when you're 13 or 14 when you're somewhat not real aware of how nice you should be to your parents, let's say. And so she said, where are you going to go? I said, well, I thought I might go for a drive. And she said, well, do you want me to go with you? And I said, well, no. Where are you going to go? I said, I thought I'd go to the beach. And she said, and what is it you're going to do when you get to the beach? I thought I might go for a swim. And she says to me, Dad, let me tell you something. If you do that, I will never forgive you. I've forgiven you a lot this year, but I won't forget that. I said, Stacy, they said we're going to be poor, and this way we won't be poor. You won't have to sell the house. She said, what are you talking about? I said, well, I've got life insurance. It'll pay off. I've checked the policy. Dad, that's just done. Stacy, it's a lot of money. Money's not important, Dad. We love you. Don't do that. Stacy, it really is a lot of money. And she pauses. She looks at me. She said, well, how much money are you talking about? I said, well, it's $600,000. So term policy. It passed the 2 years of work. Dad, sit down. Let's talk about this. I may change my mind and want you to go after all. And it was humor. It was humor that broke this spell of self-pity. Humor is what works. You know, as you all sit here this afternoon, the one thing I hope you might remember from today is that from time to time you all chuckle. That's good. President Kennedy once said, there are 3 things in life that are real: God, human folly, and laughter. Since the first two are beyond our comprehension, we must do what we can with the third. I think that is just well said. I have a bad summer. I'm indicted. I have a bad 12 counts. Could have been more, could have been less. 12. Have any of y'all ever had a speeding ticket? Ever had a traffic case? Did you hire a lawyer or did you do it on your own? Did you ever get a deal? You know, if you speed and get it over under a certain amount, you don't have to pay insurance points. So you want to do that. Very few people sign the ticket on the back and just mail it in. If you do, you're crazy. Most people get a deal, don't they? So I'm sitting there at Wade's office with Rick one day, thinking about the deal I want to get. And I've got this friend who's an SBA agent named Bill Dowdy. I don't know if you ever knew Bill Dowdy, but he was one of the best SBA agents. But he's not on my case because he's my friend, so they walked him off. So he's talking to me, telling me things I should do. And so I tell this to Wade. Wade used to play football at Carolina in the late 1950s when Joe Tatum was the coach. He's a big guy. He gets up out of his chair, walks over where I'm sitting. He takes his hand out and he slaps me. I mean, physically hits me. I know if there are any former lawyers here today, there are times when you have wanted to hit your clients. But he did. And I said, why did you do that? Jim, you need to wake up. The public is either going to nail you now or they're going to nail you later. If you persist in taking and asking for special treatment, which I wanted, we all, even though we may deny it, we all want special treatment. I know what's going to happen to you. So Wade, what do you think will happen to me if I take your advice and plead guilty to everything with no plea bargain agreement? And he says to me, he's a lawyer, he's smart. He says to me, if you do that, you will get your life back. And you will have more riches than you ever thought you would ever have. That's a real roll of the dice. You know, my best definition of, I don't know what your definition of faith is. The best definition of faith I have ever heard is that belief that you can fall or jump off a cliff and you will learn to fly. That's what he was asking me to do, was to jump off of the cliff. The nickname for the Superior Court judge who was sentencing me, whom I knew, was from Henderson. His nickname was Hang 'em High. He had a history of sentencing people to as much as he could. So anyway, Jim, I want you to go home tonight and I want you to read the Sermon on the Mount. If any of y'all read the Sermon on the Mount the last week, if any of you ever read the Sermon, really? So I said, where is it? He said, Jim, it's in the Bible. I said, wait, I know it's in the Bible. It's actually, just so you know, it's the 5th chapter of Matthew. There's a verse in there I want you to read, Jim. It's the 41st verse. I know that because I checked it a few days ago in preparation for coming here today. I read it again to make sure I'm right. And there's this line in there, the Sermon on the Mount, where Jesus is speaking. He says, if someone forces you to walk 1 mile, you should walk 2 miles. You need Jim to do more than is required. You need to do more than is asked. You need to do as much as you can. That's what you need to do. And that's the way to come back. And that's the way to start over. That is not the view of lots of lawyers. Lots of lawyers and people who have listened to me talk over the last 20-some years don't agree with that at all. They say this, that, and the other. And I look at them and I say, well, you're right. I could have done that perhaps. But then where would I be today? What would be happening to me today? You have to learn to take the long view if you can. So, I did. I did 3.5 months in Wake Correctional. It's inside the belt line, so to speak. It wasn't fun, but it was okay. One of the more humorous stories that happened when I was there, one night, Wake Forest and Carolina playing the basketball game. And you want to get your hand cut off, try to turn the television channel. 50 underlings, yeah. And I'm going up to look at it, and they've got the game on. This is back when Wake Forest was pretty good. And anyway, I couldn't watch it. So I'm walking around the prison, and some guy says, Chip, what's going on? You worried about the ball game. You're worried about a ball game? You're here in prison, and you're worried about the ball game? What's wrong with you? Well, it's a big game. And miraculously, Wake won. I was in such a great mood. The thing that I learned, everybody was in the room was pulling through Wake, which made no sense. Except when you think about it, they're always pulling for the underdog. And we were the underdog. And that's where the mentality goes in those types of situations. They're pulling for the people not supposed to do well. You know. I don't know if any of y'all have children, grown children, looking for a job right now. You know, it's tough in the job market right now. Let me tell you what's really tough. Is to look for a job in the job market when you're an ex-lawyer with a record. I had a friend who owned the Oyster Bar, 42nd Street Oyster Bar. Brett Hurley. We just closed it down in March. It's getting ready to reopen, I think, in about 6 months under new ownership. Just so you know, the clock that was over the bar, that really nice clock, they sold the clock to somebody. The person paid over $50,000 for that clock. That's closed down too. So I said, Brad, I need a job. Doing what? Well, I don't know. I'm smart. I was a lawyer. Why don't you make me a manager? Jim, do you know how to do anything? No? If I ask you to make coffee or tea, can you do it? No. Do you know how much sugar goes in the sweet tea? No. I'm not going to make you a manager. Come back at 3 o'clock and we'll see what we can do. I came back and says, all right, we're going to make you a host. So what do hosts do? I didn't know what a host, take you to your table, take your name, that sort of. How much do we make? $6 an hour. I said, was this before or after taxes? He said, it's before. He said it's before taxes. Okay. So I left. The next day I wrote my letter and quit. But just like when I was a lawyer, calling people after work so I couldn't get them to talk to you. I went at lunchtime and he was gone, so I left the letter on his desk, quitting. I didn't have to see him. I didn't show up my first shift, which was the following day. That's a firing offense not to show up for your first shift. I didn't. Then the next day I came back and said, wait, Brad, I'd like the job back. You know, memory is selective. All of my friends, all of my family, all my lawyers, all my doctors, nobody thought I should work at the Oyster Bar. Having done it for 2 or 3 years later, done okay with it, they all think it's a wonderful idea and they thought of it. So I go back. I do it pretty well as a host. I do it for 5 or 6 weeks. I like it. Okay, I don't make any money. First paycheck I got, Channel 11 from Durham had a camera crew go with me to the bank downtown Raleigh and deposit my first check. It was for about $120. It was a slow news day. Well, after that, one night, I think there was a Sunday or Monday night. You know the Masters, when the winner gets the green jacket. It's a nice green jacket. I had a green jacket that looked like that. And so this particular night, I was wearing that green jacket with some tan slacks. I thought I was a dude, had a pink tie, the whole 9 yards, you know. And I've taken this couple to their table, and I turned to the lady. She had a non-fitting dress, large dress. And I said, "So, when's your baby due?" And she said, "I'm not pregnant." Most people would apologize or say, "I'm sorry." I looked at her and said, "Help me God." I said, "Well, no more hush puppies for you." I'm just lucky he didn't kill me. He may have been quietly happy. I don't know. I don't know what he was thinking. Anyway, I wound up waiting tables as a result of that. That's how I became a waiter. I was one of the worst waiters they had when I started. I was just like some of y'all would be. I mean, this would be a fun thing for a reality show. If I could be the coach, you get 2 of you guys, say, "We're going to wait tables tonight downstairs. We will look like the game that could not shoot straight. You be dropping the plates, the dishes, getting the orders wrong, all this stuff. Give you no tips." So I trained about 3 times as long as anybody else trained. Waiting tables is a young person's job. Finally, though, out of persistence, sticking with it, I wouldn't say I became good, but I became okay. And actually made some of the most money of any of the waiters. It was what we would call sympathy tips. I couldn't maybe feed you that well, but I could do it okay. But what I could do for you at a table is I can make you enjoy yourself and have a good time. That's what I could do. That was the one thing I knew how to do. And that works everywhere. There's no job where that doesn't work well. I don't think. I did that for 2 or 3 years. And I want to say this in all seriousness. If you ask me what I was most proud of in my life, it would not be the McDonald case. I'm not proud of that. That's not what I'm most proud of. What I would be most proud of is that I accepted responsibility finally when I got in trouble. I took my lawyer's advice and pleaded guilty to everything. I didn't whine. I didn't make excuses. I just said I did it. And I waited tables. It allowed me to get my life back. It allowed me to see people and them to see me. That's not a bad thing. It allowed me to open these drapes and look outside. That's so key to starting over. You also can't be a good waiter unless you learn a degree of humility. A cocky waiter is not going to do really well. Or he may get the food right, but he won't get the tips he wants. You won't get people coming back and asking for his table. You learned vulnerability. Henry Kissinger was famous for having said that power is the great aphrodisiac. I don't think that's true. I think the great aphrodisiac in the world is vulnerability. When you show that you're vulnerable to somebody else, they will tell you about themselves. If I open up to you, that allows you to open up to me. And that works everywhere. It really does. I'd do it again if I could make no money at it. I'm too old. The last night I waited tables. You know, there's nothing worse than there's just nothing worse than about 4 young drunk guys. There's just not. They're obnoxious. And they were there at one of my tables my last night at the worship bar, ragging me about being old, all this kind of stuff. I wasn't that old. I mean, it was, but not like today. And finally, I was able to shut up when I looked at him and said, let me tell you something. Yeah, if I were you, I wouldn't talk to somebody who's going to be the last person to see your food before I bring it to the table. So I started over. I want to tell you all in the last 2 or 3 minutes, you all have such a tremendous opportunity here to do so many things. From trips, to book clubs, to music, to great dining, walks, shop. There's so many things. Somebody sent me a list. I think John sent me a list. Somebody sent me a list. I think it was John. Good Lord. A book club. Let me tell you, I started a book club in the apartment building where I live. I'm lucky if I get 10 people there. A trip to D.C. for 4 days. How many of y'all went to D.C. as a kid when you were in the 5th or 6th grade? See, it's what we do. When I was in trouble, my 5th grade teacher, I went to Washington, D.C., but sent me $100. Unbelievable. There's this great line. You think it's scripture, but it's not. It's a Gracie Allen. She wrote to her husband, George, do not put a period where God has only put a comma. My first night in jail, I was in a room. The next day, I was going to Troy for processing. I had an orange jumpsuit on, handcuffs, and leg irons. That's how they transport inmates. I was the only one in the van. We were driving out of Raleigh. We stopped right over the US 1, near the state fairgrounds. The driver stops the van, gets out, walks around, opens up my door, has a thermos with him and says, my wife knows who you are and knows you're going to go with me today. So she's made for both of us a special thermos of coffee. How would you like yours? So you think Starbucks is good? You should try coffee that someone else has made for you under those circumstances. And then I get to the prison and I go to the infirmary. There's a young nurse there. She looks at me, she points her fingers. I know who you are. You're that preacher. Jim Baker. She says, smile for me, darling. I said, smile. She says, you're a dead ringer. And then she says, let me take your blood pressure. She puts it around my arm. She takes it. She, It's a little high today, Dalton. She notices a tear come down the side of my cheek. She wipes it away and says, you're under a little pressure today. I don't know either of these people's names. I've never seen them since that day. But if you want to do something cool for somebody, just cool and nice, do something kind for somebody who will never know your name. Thank y'all very much.